Okay. What's the handicap principle? Anybody? Yeah, I gotta pick someone over here. Meeny, meeny, miny. What do you think? You can be wrong. It's okay. What does it have to do with a peacock? Anything? Keep your hand down. No. Yeah, come on.
Isn't it that like for the peacock?
What?
Isn't it for the peacock that the males have like really vibrant colors, so that's like shows off that they're a better like male fit, but then at the same time like for predators, they're easy to detect.
Okay. So it's essentially a non-signal. So we've been talking about communication, and this is part of it. And of course, a peacock's tail. This was one of Darwin's biggest puzzles. Why would animals have something that probably would reduce their fitness? I mean, selection should wipe that out, right? And yet they do. And so he didn't come up with a handicap principle. He remarked on it. But he said, well, it looks like it's for mating. So in other words, there's selection, but he called it sexual selection. But the handicap principle can apply to a lot of different situations and not just mating. We're most familiar with mating, but there are certainly other reasons in terms of signaling honestly. So this is one of those situations where, well, I guess if you could deceive, then it wouldn't be an honest signal, and it would probably would no longer be reliable, and whoever was the receiver wouldn't be using it anymore. So there has to be some cost. That's why it's called, in a sense, a handicap. Anybody know who Kurt Vonnegut is? Okay. Anyway, he wrote a whole bunch of stuff, but one of his books, it was some futuristic society, and they didn't want to make anybody feel bad, so they made everybody equal. So if you were fine, but there's people who, let's say they lost a leg or they limp or whatever, well, you would have to wear something that made you limp, a handicap, just so that everybody would be equal. Newscasters would have to, instead of speaking clearly, well, there's some people that don't. Whatever it is. Well, people who could speak, they'd have to put marbles in their mouth. Okay? So, that's a handicap. Now, obviously, if you could put marbles in your mouth and still speak clearly, that would indicate, of course, that, well, you're pretty special, because it's hard to speak clearly with marbles in your mouth. In fact, I don't know, some people might actually practice that way so that, yeah. Where did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about it, but I just saw it in the movie.
Oh, you did? What movie?
It was a Russian movie.
What?
It was a Russian movie.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. Anyway, yeah. So let's say Shakespearean actors or something like that. You put marbles in your mouth, and I mean, remember, Patrick Stewart, who's on been in a lot of stuff. He was on Star Trek. Well, he's got that incredible Shakespearean voice. I wouldn't put it past him that he probably practiced as a kid with marbles in his mouth. Everybody was wondering, why are you doing that? But he knew. So, this is in terms of communication. So, this is the peacock's tail. He proposed a mechanism known as natural selection, but there was a phenomenon like a peacock's tail that could not adequately explain the theory of natural selection, and so he came up with sexual selection. In other words, something that, though it might reduce fitness in terms of survival, might enhance breeding opportunities. And so higher selection or higher fitness in terms of reproduction. What's a Fisherian runaway selection? Anybody? Who was Fisher? Fisher was a very important person. Okay.
Did he work with somebody else?
What?
Did Fisher work with somebody else? Or it was just him?
Now, he's known for two things. The most important is that he worked for Guinness. Okay? Guinness Brewing Company. The Fisher's Tea Test. Right? He, all that statistical stuff. He came up with all that stuff. Okay? What does this have to do with this Fisher? Well, first of all, do you think being able to drink is an honest signal?
Being able to drink what?
Drink, let's say Guinness, like lots and lots and lots of Guinness. Just, you know, you go into a pub in Dublin or something like that, and you're just drinking pint after pint of Guinness. Now, tell me something. What do most people try to do under those circumstances? Do they want to show that they're falling down drunk? Or do they want to say, I'm fine, right? You know, it's like you're signaling that I can drink as much as I want, but I'm still standing. Okay? I'm better than you. Well, you may not be so smart, but regardless, better condition. Okay. Still, what does this have to do with it? Well, it's the same Fisher. The same Fisher who worked at Guinness and invented, well, I wouldn't say invented modern statistics, but did a lot with it. Oh, it was called the student tea test, that's right, yeah. Is the same guy who came up with runaway sexual selection, which is that just because of something, let's say in the female, that she likes in terms of a trait, like a peacock's tail, maybe it started out as a little tail first, there was variation. Males with longer tails got more mating opportunities, and it kind of ran away with itself. Had nothing really to do necessarily with genetic quality. It was just females liked it, and then eventually there was also, there was selection on males for longer tail, and then there was also another heritable part was that females liked bigger tails or longer tails. And it went until it finally went to a point where it was just too much. It stopped. But you still ended up with these elaborate tails. And the females ended up with sexy sons. Didn't mean they were any better. It's just that they were sexier, so they got more reproductive opportunities. So just think of a nicely dressed dandy, you know, with a top hat, a cane with a gold top, drives up in a Bentley, right? Okay, that kind of stuff. Now, of course, that actually does signal, perhaps, that this guy's rich and he's got resources. So that's actually an honest signal of condition. But there could have the character that we're talking about. Now, it could be plumage, it could be sound, like a song, or any other kind of thing. With a slight female preference when the trait first appeared, maybe pre-existing sensory bias. Anybody remember what that is? We talked about the last time.
Sensory sensory bias?
What?
Sensory bias?
Yeah.
It's like when there's something that attracts them that has nothing to do with what is the good part, but it's just
Right. So a good example is, let's say, a lot of birds like to feed on berries. And they like to feed on bright red berries. And near Chernobyl, because of all the nuclear radiation, there's been a lot of birds that are showing, like some problems with genetic problems with radiation. But let's say one of them ended up having kind of a red feather on its forehead. And everybody likes to eat berries, and so the females have this pre-existing sensory bias. And males with a bigger spot get more mating opportunities. So it starts that way. That's what they meant here. And it's been kind of shown. See, Fisher doesn't rely anything on the signal being honest. It's just that it's a preference, a small preference initially, that then runs away with itself. But Zahavi, this Israeli, he thought, well, maybe it's actually a signal for genetic quality, let's say. That the only individuals who could afford it were those with high genetic quality. So those with low genetic quality, they might actually signal it too, but let's say they wouldn't survive. Or they couldn't signal as well because it's just too expensive in terms of resources. Let's say diet. Okay, so Zahavi came up with this novel idea in the mid-70s called the handicap principle. It says that females prefer males with handicaps, let's say handicaps that reduce survival, for an example, but not necessarily, because handicaps are indicators of heritable viability. In other words, a male can afford being conspicuous because he can still get away from any predators, right? I'm here, but I'm just too cool. Now, some other, let's say, animals, let's say these are little guppies. So guppies with bright spots get more mating opportunities than guppies that don't, but they're preyed upon by these larger cichlid predators, and the ones that are more conspicuous get eaten up quicker. But those females, they definitely show a real choice for conspicuous males. Well, there's going to be some difference in quality in terms of a male being able to not get eaten or not get eaten as quickly as some other male. A cheap male who's really bright, he's gone within no time. Compared to another male who's smart, so he knows what the predator's up to and maybe how to get away, like a little strategic, plus he's faster. You can't fake being faster, you're just faster or not. And if that's actually an indicator of genetic quality, only those individuals with high genetic quality can actually get away. They can get away even though there's the handicap of being bright. Then this is the idea of the handicap principle in terms of genetic quality. It has to be heritable as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be predation. It can be anything that you think of. It could be peacock's feathers. I mean, that's really expensive, making feathers like that. Well, it probably increases the risk of predation, but it also is expensive in terms perhaps of diet. I mean, you've got to be able to, eat really well to make feathers of that kind of quality. Another example would be being an altruist. Donald Trump. Okay? Now, he's ostentatious in his wealth, right? He also gives a lot to philanthropic organizations. He appears to be altruistic. What he's actually doing is he's showing, I have so much wealth and I could waste it. Now, you can't fake that. Well, you could for a while, but eventually you'd be found out as a scammer. And only someone who's really rich can be a really good philanthropist. Now, of course, on a small scale, people can volunteer for things and all that. And it might increase, let's say, their fitness a little bit, but let's say making a whole wing for a hospital with your name on it. Well, you're doing a great thing there. But it's also probably not so altruistic. It probably has to do somewhat with status as well. People say, oh, he's such a good person. Well, and then, he gets more mating opportunities because of it. Certainly the Donald does. Okay. So this is what he wrote. Well-developed sexually selected character. Flashy tail. Okay. It provides a survival test. So a female which can discriminate between a male possessing a sexually selected character from one without it can discriminate between a male who has passed a test and one who has not been tested. So, first of all, if you survive with a big tail, the ones that don't, she doesn't even have to worry about. They're gone. She might have grown up with him and think, oh, he was so sweet, but he's gone. Okay. But there's another possibility is that the male just can't make such a bright tail. He's still there, because he's not quite as conspicuous. But the female is like, oh, let's just be friends. Right? Okay. So females with selected males with the most developed characters can be sure that they have selected from amongst the best genotypes of the male population. Again, the good genes model. So, handicap principle can be used to account for mating preferences in animals, but other things as well. The principle relies on three kind of tenets. Animals communicate with each other through signals. Okay, we know that. These signals, in order to be effective, must be honest. Okay? That means really honest. Like, you can't be dishonest and get away with it. And in other words, honest signals, to be honest, their honesty is maintained because they're expensive. Only certain individuals can afford to have those characters or those behaviors. Okay. Why are honest signals expensive? Or, well, that's good enough. We'll just think about that. Well, obviously, there has to be a cost, right? That's the expense. Only those that can afford the cost can signal that way. Sexually selected traits are like kind of conspicuous consumption, like someone running around in a Bentley or a Ferrari or something like that. You can't just, well, I guess you can go out and rent a Ferrari, but in general, you have to be rich to afford a Ferrari. And of course, it's a good way, let's say, to pick up chicks. Okay, and the wealthy indulge in waste in order to advertise their wealth, even though it might actually look like altruism. Oh, I'm giving things away. Now, there's probably both going on here. People don't have to actually be aware of what they're doing. They're doing it like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett to get rid of, let's say, malaria. They're spending millions and millions of dollars. It's going to be great. And they're finally getting a vaccine. There's a good chance that malaria will be reduced. And it's a major killer in the tropics and other things, that other morbidity and mortality. Okay. So, but at the same time, they, wealthy, who can afford it, they also, of course, get status. So it may not be quite as altruistic as it seems. If an individual male couldn't actually handle the handicap, was truly handicapped by the signal, then a female, why would she want to mate with him? Why would she want to have sons and daughters that are as low genetic quality as the male does? So a desirable male is one that can afford the cost. And even though he's handicapped, he really isn't. Okay. The cost ensures the honesty. Flaunting the handicap requires a real investment, not a fake investment. If they can't afford to make it, they can't cheat it. So cheaters aren't allowed. There are going to be individuals who might try to cheat, but they really can't afford it. Okay. Now, I mentioned you have to think about who is the signal for. We've been talking mainly about mating. But signals, of course, can be for other receivers. Even sexually selected traits can be signals. So, in addition to females, what is the peacock's tail maybe a signal for as well? Who else?
Predator.
A predator? Anybody else?
Other males.
Huh?
Other males.
Other males, right. Okay, so you have to think about, now, the handicap principle still applies. Okay? Doesn't really matter. As long as the cost is expensive and only some individuals can actually get away with it, will it persist? Anybody know what stoating behavior is? Stoat? Whoop! 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 Okay, I'm a gazelle. I'm not really a gazelle. But I'm a gazelle, and there's a big predator coming along, and I see the predator, and he sees me, and I start jumping up and down. And he's going, oh God, what an idiot. And he comes over and eats me. But let's say that this behavior, I can afford to do it. It shows that, well, go ahead and chase me. You're just going to waste your time. Okay? So a lot of cervids, like gazelles and deer and elk and springbok and all sorts of different animals, when dealing with predators, make a very conspicuous display for everyone to see. It's actually one of those signals, we talked about communication, where both the signaler and the receiver benefit. You'll say, well, the signaler, of course, the predator, let's say the lion, is going to come along and chase the gazelle and try to eat him. But the predator, what benefit does he get out of this? Anything? Think about what benefit does a predator get from a stoating gazelle?
Save its energy to host another.
What?
It could save its energy to host another gazelle.
Exactly. It's actually, this gazelle is saying, look, this is the best thing for you and me. Okay? You're going to waste your energy. I'm going to waste my energy. Why don't we save our energy for something better? Like, I'm going to go have sex with a nice gazelle, and you can go chase some other gazelle that looks like he's kind of long in the tooth. Right? Okay, so there's a benefit there. It's actually on a signal, there's a benefit for both. Like, hey, don't chase me because it's a waste of time. Now, of course, let's say you had a gazelle that stoated or pronged, it's called pronging as well, but it really wasn't. They could fake it. Well then, after a while, the lion would probably figure out, or the cheetah, that, oh, it's not really a reliable signal and I'll chase him anyway. Kind of like that orchid releases a pheromone that is just like the pheromone of female. It's deception in this case. It's not an honest signal, but it acts like an honest signal. The pheromone is an honest signal. Female says, oh, I'm ready. And the male comes along, right? Okay. So this is a gazelle, and he's, now, I know, you saw me and you think that's not, what I did was not stoating. Well, it wasn't. This is real stoating.
I mean, yours was awfully close.
What?
Yours was awfully close.
I know, thanks. Yeah, I'm lucky I didn't fall down.
That would be an honest.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, say, oops, God, I just tried. Doesn't trying count? No. Okay, here's some more stoating. Now, there's other hypotheses. What other hypotheses might there be for stoating?
Warning your kin.
Hmm?
Warning kin. maybe?
Okay, so not only, it's not between you and the predator, it's also warning kin selection, right? I stoat, so what would that predict? When would you actually stoat?
See better.
Well, okay, would you stoat when there's no kin around? No, you'd only stoat when there's a predator and kin. Okay, if there's just a predator around, then you can say, oh, stoating, this signal is actually for the predator. Now, it could be both, yeah.
What if it's like a fixed action pattern? Then it wouldn't matter what.
It's still a signal. If it's an honest signal, it might be expensive to do.
I mean, if kin were around.
Oh, well, no. Let's say you only do it when kin are around. Could be a fixed action pattern. There are some, really behaviors that are expensive that that individuals would probably only do with kin around. So it could be, but I think for the most part, you have to have an animal, of course, that discerns, oh, there's no kin around, so don't do it, because that's going to attract the predator to me instead of, helping kin. Because the idea is, if you stoat only for the predator, that's personal fitness, okay, direct fitness. If you stoat for kin, it means, well, perhaps the predator is going to actually see you and not the others, but the kin, because they share your genes, then it's indirect fitness. So this is kind of what I mentioned before. It's communicating, so the predator gets the benefit of actually knowing don't bother, and the gazelle gets the benefit of not being chased. So there's a benefit both ways. Okay, so there's a hypothesis, well, let's say hypothesis, this trait has evolved as a mean of communication between prey and predator. It involves an investment of energy on the part of the gazelle, so it can't be faked. So you could make some predictions about this, obviously. That in fact, that behavior, even though it's expensive to make, it's beneficial to you. It would be suicidal, like me, trying to jump like a gazelle. I would fall over, and I'd be exposed as, you know, a fakery, a forger, a scallywag, a ne'er-do-well, a rapscallion. Never mind. Okay, now, of course, there's the ones we're most familiar with, of course, are mating displays. And if this is truly an honest signal, then the females benefit and the males benefit and their offspring benefit as well. Now remember, they're not doing it for the good of the species. They're doing it for the good of themselves. Now, of course, females, well, there is this thing about, you know, raising offspring or investment in offspring are more expensive for females because either the eggs are bigger, more expensive to make, you make fewer of them, or, and then the males can make lots of sperm, they're cheap. So for the female, they want investment, and for the male, basically the limiting resource is the number of females. But it's kind of a nice idea, I guess, for males, isn't it? You know, oh God, we just, I guess we can't help ourselves, right? I mean, I'm just a male and I've got cheap sperm and I might as well, you know, it's not going to hurt you if I mate with you and then someone else. I mean, just deal with it, right? Okay. Well, turns out females actually look around too, and there's a number of different reasons. Well, with humans, males and females both provide parental care. That's expensive, right? So in a situation like that, you would expect that both would keep an eye out on each other. Because if a male is gone and not providing resources, then the female suffers and has to do all the work herself. And likewise, while the male is off tooting around, she decides to get a few extra pair of copulations in it as well, right? Because actually, her husband's a bum, right? He's just a bum. And this guy over here, he's actually, I just couldn't get him as a husband, but I can certainly get him as a mate. And I'll have my bum husband actually raise the kids, right? That'd be great. That's where the milkman comes in. Okay. Plumage as a handicap, dice, same sort of thing. Birds with or frogs with a very involved call, something that's expensive to make. Okay, white pelicans during the mating season develop bulges at the base of the beak. Okay, I never noticed that. I don't believe it. Okay, now, a lot of times this idea of choice, signaling and response implies thinking. Agency, intent. Can yeast think? Well, I don't know. I've never met a yeast. I've met a lot of yeast. They've made me feel really good at times, so maybe they can communicate pretty well. So never mind. Okay, but it could apply. Handicap principle can apply to a lot of different things. the handicap principle does not rely on consciousness whatsoever. Just to get that straight, like any other trait. So they produce, yeast reproduce sexually and asexually. When they reproduce sexually, there's this peptide molecule on their cell surface, that apparently acts as a signal to other yeast to mate. Now, there's not male and female yeast, or unisex, but they're still sexual. Now there's, usually the peptides are kind of expensive. They're made of oligosaccharides like sugars and lipids, things that one would suspect would be expensive. And that those expensive things signal, let's say, qualities of the yeast. And then, of course, yeast cells advertise their desirability as mating partners by decorating the peptide molecules as their mating signal. In other words, the more expensive, the better. And the prediction, what's the prediction on that? Will we get more mating opportunities? Right? So yeast with expensive peptide molecules would get more mating. So here's the cost to maintain the signal, and the modified signal works just like a handicap. Apparently this does happen. But you would expect it. That's the thing. You don't. None of this stuff, even for humans, because we think that we make decisions all the time. We make choices. Well, a lot of the stuff that we do, we really have very little choice. We don't even know what we're doing half the time. Well, at least I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But that's that's what happens. Your fitness goes down as age and fitness are inversely related. I have a feeling. I don't know for sure yet, but I'm getting that feeling. Okay. Now,